Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing my first ever book to movie comparison, and in this video we're going to be looking at Cell, the Stephen King book. Now I've made reviews for the book and the movie, so if you want to check those out you can click right here or click on the links in the description. So there's a lot of differences between the 2006 novel and the 2016 film adaptation, and I counted over 30 differences. This may not consist of each and every difference between the two, but these are the ones that I found. If there's any that I left out, I do apologize, but I'm pretty sure these are all the essential differences. So we're going to take a look into it. And please keep in mind, if you haven't read the book or if you haven't seen the movie, there will be tons of spoilers in this video. So make sure you do those first, or if you don't really care about that, then enjoy. So firstly, in the book, the cell phones are, the cell phones of the 2000s. In the movie, they've all been replaced by smartphones because, well, cell phones have come a long way since. Though there is one old cell phone in the movie, but it's used for a specific purpose, and we'll get to that later. Then there's the fact that the outbreak takes place outdoors in the book, when Clay is on his way to get some ice cream for his son Johnny, and that's when everybody starts freaking out because of the pulse. If they're on their cell phones, of course. But in the movie, it all takes place at an airport, and everybody is conveniently on their cell phones. Clay and his son Johnny are engaged in a video call at the airport, but Clay's phone dies, and so he rushes to a payphone to continue the call. But then he's forced to put that aside when the pulse starts affecting everyone. One of the creepiest scenes in the opening of the book is the scene where a dog's ear gets bitten off by a zombie. In the movie, the dog is pretty much eaten alive. I mean, there's a zombie that goes for its stomach. Thankfully, we don't get to see any of the bloodshed, so there's that. But the dog pretty much screams in pain, so that's the scary part. Both of these instances were pretty hard for me to stomach because I love dogs. Then there's Clay's portfolio. In the book, he's able to keep it safe when the outbreak begins, and I think he pretty much keeps it with him until they get to Tom's house, and I think that's where he leaves it. In the movie, it gets stabbed through with a kitchen knife, and he's forced to leave it behind because he can't get the knife out. But all these drawings that are in his portfolio, there are copies of it at his apartment, so it's fine, doesn't matter. In the book, there's a police officer by the name of Ulrich Ashland who comes to the aid of Clay and Tom. But in the movie, the police officer's name is never revealed and he doesn't have as much dialogue as he does in the book. Tom McLeod is a short, white, gay man who lives alone with his cat and is not very fond of cell phones. He meets Clay for the first time when the outbreak first happens outdoors. In the movie, after Clay has escaped from the airport and makes his way to a train and a subway, the train driver so happens to be Tom. And Tom is a tall black man who is a former Vietnam vet revisiting the terrors of war in the midst of this new outbreak. And just like in the book, he is gay. I guess they made this decision because almost a decade prior to this movie, John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson starred in another Stephen King adaptation called 1408, which is based on a short story of the same name, which you can find in the Everything's Eventual collection by Stephen King. One of the highlights of that movie was the chemistry between these two actors, and I think they wanted to recapture that with this movie. And in my opinion, they nailed it. But even though the character was changed drastically for the movie, I think it was done quite well. Also, in the movie, it's revealed that he lost most of his money in the global financial crisis in 2008, and then he lost his emotional stability in what he describes as the Great Divorce of 2009. The important thing is that just like in the book, he acts as a form of comic relief, and that Samuel L. Jackson plays the part well, and all of that turned out perfectly. Next up is DJ Liquid. This is a character not from the book. He was written exclusively for the movie, and he meets up with Clay and Tom on the train that Tom is driving on the subway, and he does hang out with them for a minute or two until he's inevitably killed off, Jack Torrance style. But he's a character that I didn't really connect with. I actually found him to be kind of annoying, and I guess that's because he's not from the book, so it didn't really matter. But he was funny to some extent, and I can see why some people actually liked his character. Next up is Alice Maxwell. Now Alice meets up with Clay and Tom once they found a safe haven from the zombies in both the book and the movie. But in the book, they find her outside the hotel that Clay was staying at, and they try to convince her to come inside. Whereas in the movie, she simply knocks on Clay's apartment door and shows up with blood on her clothes and a knife in hand. It's also implied in the book that she and her mother were in a taxi when the pulse happened, and her mother was on the phone at the time and she turned into a zombie. Then she killed the taxi driver. Alice had to defend herself against her mother to the point where she broke her nose and then she ran off. She was traumatized by that whole incident. In the movie, Alice was in a situation where she had no choice but to kill her mother after her mother had become one of them. So there's that. And in the book, Alice carries around this baby sneaker. I think she found it in Tom's house, and she had been carrying that around with her for quite some time until her tragic death. But in the movie, this is never brought up. It's never seen, it's never mentioned, just no baby sneakers of any kind. She also had some interesting interactions with Jordan, a character who she meets later at Gayton Academy. But because the movie is only 95 minutes or so, their interactions are very limited. Then there's the hotel that Clay stays at. It's called the Atlantic Avenue Inn. This is the name that it's given in the book, and we're also introduced to the desk clerk, Mr. Riccardi. But in the movie, he simply has an apartment and there's no Mr. Riccardi or any desk clerk to speak of. Clay and Tom just go straight into his apartment right after the initial outbreak. Then, right across from the hotel in the book is a cafe called the Metropolitan Cafe. That's where Clay, Tom, and Alice go to get some food and stuff like that. This is completely cut out from the movie. After leaving the cafe, they make their way to Tom's house in Malden, and they come across an old religious plump woman, but they get so annoyed with her because of her, I guess you could call it end times preaching, that Alice basically knocks her out. But don't worry, she's not dead. This is also not in the movie. They also come across a bald Irish psychopath who is wearing a Celtic jacket, and you know, when they first encountered him, they almost mistook him for a zombie. The whole point of this is that, aside from the zombies, some people in general are gonna lose their minds because of the state of the city. And again, this was cut out from the movie. So after all of that, Tom, Clay, and Alice finally arrive at Tom's house in Malden, and they stay there for a while before they plan their next move. But in the movie, they don't go to Tom's house. In fact, after the initial outbreak, they go to Clay's apartment before making their way to Gayton Academy. Then there's Tom's cat. In the book, Tom has a cat, but in the movie, Clay is the one with the cat. Well, given how lonely Clay must have been while separated from his family, it would kind of make sense to have a companion of sorts in the form of a cat. So, at least we got to see the cat. That's what matters. Now, in the book, it's kind of a long way to Gayton Academy. They stay near an abandoned barn, they seek help from Mr. Rescue Hant, and he shares his experiences with the zombies. They take a route across Pelham, they stay at a motel, and then eventually they do get there, but just before they do, they come across a crazy lady by the name of Natalie. and we do see her again later in the book. But in the movie, they have one encounter with a group of zombies before they arrive at Gayton Academy. Then when they arrive at Gayton Academy, everything plays out pretty much the same way until we get to the soccer field that's full of zombies, just sleeping. They're all transmitting a song because they act as a hive mind, and in the book, the song is Baby Elephant Walk. But in the movie, and this is true, the scene is on YouTube if you're curious, it's the Trollio song. I can't play it because the video will get claimed, and I can't sing it because I'm a horrible singer. It's like Stephen King basically trolled his own audience because remember, he co-wrote this movie. And then there's the plan to wipe out these zombies. In the book, Clay finds a truck filled with fertilizer, and the plan was to drive the truck around the field and spread the fertilizer and then cause an explosion of sorts. And that's where the guns come in. But instead, Clay ends up shooting the truck explodes, and the fire is so big that it spreads throughout the field, which also results in debris falling everywhere. But in the movie, they decide to drive the truck through the field, crunching some of the zombies, crunch crunch, and they start spreading the fertilizer around. Then Charles Ardai fires an explosive arrow that causes a massive fire, and then that causes the truck to explode once they get out. Then of course, just when all seems well, the headmaster Charles Ardai dies. In the book, the characters find him with a pin through his eye, which will of course damage the brain, which will of course result in death. And this is all the work of the Raggedy Man. But in the movie, a piece of debris strikes him, which is kind of disappointing. Next up is the Raggedy Man. In the book, he makes his first couple of appearances through dreams that Clay has. This particular individual bears a lot of resemblance to a character from his graphic novel, Dark Wanderer. And I think he's known as the Night Traveler. He is in the movie, I think he is in the book as well. So he makes a few appearances in Clay's dreams, and some of the other characters have the same dreams, but not all of them. After the very first dream, Clay and the others come face to face with the Raggedy Man while still at the academy, and when they do, they're surrounded by melting boom boxes. But in the movie, there are no melting boom boxes, and he just wears headphones instead, unlike in the book. And he's killed in the explosion at the Northern Counties Expo, which takes place near the latter stages of the book. In the movie, he appears in one dream, and while the characters are leaving the roadside bar, which is where they go to once they've left Gayton Academy, he can be seen watching them. And then he appears at the end, which we'll get to in a bit.